From his extraordinarily high-level grappling mastery to his upcoming career-peaking fight with Charles Oliveira at UFC 289. Here's why fighters fear Beneil Dariush. While everyone in the UFC is going crazy because of grapplers dominating the divisions, Dariush is one grappler whose skills are often overlooked and severely underrated. With the current state of the UFC, you can't only be competent at striking, because if you end up fighting one of the grappling giants like Khamzat or Islam, you might as well be handing your joints to them on a silver platter. But avid UFC fans know that Dariush poses just as big a threat with his grappling as anyone else in the octagon. After all, he started practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the year 2007 and ended up learning so fast that he earned his black belt in just 5 years. If you don't think that's impressive, then I should also add the fact that he was a no-GI world champion in blue, purple, and even the brown belt while working his way up. He sure does know how to put his skills to good use too, because out of his 22 professional wins, 8 of which were through submissions. I mean, any UFC fan with a good eye can tell you how calculated his little movements are to gain the edge over his opponent in the octagon. It's pretty scary because Dariush is unbelievably fast in his ground game, and what's even scarier is that to have those quick moves in his muscle memory, he's probably trained for each scenario that his opponents puts him in beforehand. Honestly, that's an excellent example of his genius fight IQ as well. Now, that doesn't mean you can just write off his striking, because with one look at his highlight reel, you'll see Dariush is a knockout artist. His base as a grappler and submission specialist can be misleading because his striking is just as scary, leaving those ignorant of it knocked out on the octagon floor. I can't imagine being on the other end of those strikes, because just the sounds the impact of his punches create make those watching grab their guts in horror. The Iranian fighter wasn't afraid to put it on display either on his fight against James Vick, where Vick had Dariush in a sort of clinch, but he pulled out and absolutely crushed Vick's chin with an overhand left. The ref immediately knew that the fight was over, because there's no way that punch wouldn't have warranted a stoppage. No one could have expected that Dariush had such a heavy hand, but that just gives him the element of surprise. His knockout can't even be called a fluke either, because he recreated the punch and claimed another victim, Drakkar Klose, with his striking in UFC 248. I mean, this knockout even had Joe Rogan screaming his lungs out. I get it too, because Klose got his head absolutely rocked by the Iranian, and even had his eyes open after losing consciousness. So if you ask me, Beneil is no stranger to sending fighters to the Shadow Realm. All this just goes to show how well-rounded of a fighter Dariush really is, so finding a crack in his game isn't an easy thing to do. That's why his slow but destined rise to fame in the UFC was so exciting to watch. Longtime fans of Dariush will tell you that he's not a man of many words. In the world of UFC, where fighters like Colby Covington, Chael Sonnen, and Conor McGregor push promos like WWE wrestlers, Dariush likes to let his fists do the talking. And as an intimidation tactic, this works very well. Sadly, this doesn't make for good marketing though, so he often falls a few steps short of the spotlight, but his undeniable talent was going to get him there eventually. Another thing that kept him underrated were his fights against big-name fighters. The usual road to mainstream UFC success is that a new fighter with a good record fights someone who is already famous. If they win that fight, then their success will skyrocket their name into the spotlight. But Dariush had trouble finding fights with well-known fighters, and the one chance he got to fight Edson Barboza, he got knocked out with a flying knee. After another loss, his luck started to change, and the Jiu-Jitsu champion went on a crazy 6-fight win streak, making his way up the division until he ended up fighting another big name, Tony Ferguson, and won by decision. After that, Dariush got some well-deserved attention. He even got a whole video from MMA's favorite big mouth, Uncle Chael, who declared himself an absolute fan of Beneil's. Now, thanks to his newfound fame, his next fight is going to be against former lightweight division champion Charles Oliveira. So people can't seem to get enough of it and definitely have some things to say about Beneil's next big matchup. Facing off against someone who has had a title reign as successful as Oliveira's recent run, Dariush doesn't have a lot of people really betting on it. After all, DuBronx has been absolutely demolishing huge fighters at the top of their game, with the likes of Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, and Michael Chandler. So fans are having a hard time imagining Dariush getting his hand raised at the end. Josh Thompson, on the other hand, believes that Dariush is capable of even more than winning the Oliveira fight, saying that he can even take down the current lightweight champion, Islam Makhachev. Okay, now everyone must be thinking that's a little too far, but Thompson is saying this as an MMA veteran and a former training partner of Islam. He thinks that Dariush has a very unorthodox fighting style, and it can throw fighters off their game, especially with how well-rounded he is too. Beneil can take strikers to the ground and grapplers to their feet while still being able to dominate in both cases. Of course, there are those who've been supporting Beneil from the start, with their beliefs held strong by Dariush's current 8-fight win streak. Yep, the Iranian Ultimate Fighter still isn't getting a shot at the lightweight title after winning 8 whole fights, that 2 in a row. UFC, please give this man a raise at least. After all that, if his fight against Oliveira isn't well-deserved, I don't know what is. That being said, Charles better watch out because Dariush is not like the others he's faced. Oliveira for a pretty long time seemed unstoppable, but things may look different in hindsight. He faced a whole bunch of strikers and took them to the ground, where he had the advantage with his competent BJJ. Yeah, that's probably not going to be that much of an advantage against Dariush though. He can without a doubt go toe-to-toe against Charles with no problem at all on the ground because of his foundation in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Sure, Charles is a pretty good striker, but he doesn't deliver knockouts like Beneil. I mean, I haven't even started talking about the Iranian fighter's absolute iron chin. For real, it looks like he can't be knocked out the way he just tanks hits to the face. And after he punches back, fighters seem to start doing the chicken dance. Back in UFC 248 against Drakkar Klose, Beneil just ate a match-ending flurry of punches and knocked out Klose completely unfazed. So yeah, Charles Oliveira's striking might just be light work for Dariush's chin, especially seeing as how the former champion lost his title to Islam Makhachev, who is of the same frame and build as Beneil. Makhachev's wrestling and jiu-jitsu skills also proved to be a deciding factor in his win against Oliveira, who lost by submission. So if Islam was Do Bronx's kryptonite, then he's not going to have it easy in UFC 289 against Benny. All things considered, with the hype around this fight, it's going to be huge for both Oliveira and Dariush. I mean, the fans are absolutely itching to see Beneil fight, especially after rumors were circulating that Poirier might be fighting him, until his match with Gaethje was booked for UFC 291. Then Dariush kind of uncharacteristically even claimed that Dustin was running away from him. So that just made fans realize the Iranian is hungry for a good old-fashioned brawl. Meanwhile, Charles Oliveira hadn't entered the octagon since his title loss in UFC 280. And when the news hit that his next fight was against Beneil, everyone knew they were going to see two fighters absolutely desperate for a win give it their all in the match. Oliveira even said he needs a fight against a winner, and Dariush is the perfect choice with his 8-match winning streak. Now, seeing this match made in heaven, the fans couldn't wait with how hyped up this fight was, until they ultimately had to because the Brazilian said he wanted to delay the fight since he had an injury while he was training. So fans now have to wait until one whole event later to see the fight in UFC 289. This didn't kill the hype though, because now both fighters will be fighting at their best. I'm just drooling to see these two face off with how much buildup has gone into this match. Oliveira better be careful though, unless he wants to be the 9th number on Dariush's win streak. So from his upcoming career-peaking fight with Charles Oliveira at UFC 289 to Beneil Dariush's extraordinarily high-level grappling mastery, that's all there is to know about why fighters fear Beneil Dariush.